Affordable housing will be on the ballot this November. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Anna Lewin, the CEO of the South Carolina Community Loan Fund. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook.
Anna Lewin, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hi, Quintin. Thank you for having me back on.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, you are the executive director of the South Carolina Community Loan Fund. Talk to me about who Anna Lewin is these days amidst COVID.
Well, Anna Lewin is still the same Anna Lewin, just working from home. Our entire staff has been working from home since the middle of March. But I have to tell you that the organization is doing really well. We've been in a good position to help support our borrowers, not only by launching a new working capital loan product, but also by working with existing borrowers on interest-only or forbearance periods. So just a very, uncertain time, obviously, for all of us. But all in all, we are doing okay. We are hanging in there, doing what we do, which is, continuing to provide loans and access to capital, and also supporting our existing borrowers. We have moved all of our technical assistance programs online, which has actually been a great thing because it's increased access to those programs. So the number of people that we are serving through our entrepreneurial training programs and our healthy food access training programs has actually increased during COVID because people no longer have to get in their cars to drive to us. So excited about that. Like I said, a lot of uncertainty, but some good things happening in the midst of the uncertainty.
And you talk about those existing borrowers. How many of those borrowers have been helped by you all since COVID?
A relatively small percentage, I would say, maybe somewhere around 15-20% of our existing borrowers needed some sort of forbearance or interest only, and some of them have been able to come off of those programs and are back to just being able to kind of function as normal as possible these days. So, definitely feel very fortunate. And a lot of our borrowers were, as many small business owners have been and nonprofit leaders have been, just very sort of proactive about getting out front, in terms of what they need to make it through this really bumpy time.
And I know you talked earlier about capital access and the product. What exactly is that product?
So we created a working capital product for COVID relief. So it has, a shortened application process. It has sort of a quicker underwriting process. We do smaller amounts through that loan product than we normally would. So the minimum on that product is $10,000, which we typically wouldn't do a loan that small. The rate is fixed at prime plus one. If folks who are watching want more information about that, they can find it at our website, which is scommunityloanfund.org, and there's a COVID page on the website that they can go to.
And how has the prime fixed rate been since COVID?
Well, rates have obviously gone down. So interest rates are dropping everywhere, and so that, of course, does impact the prime rate. So right now, prime is 3.25, and it's been there several months. Rates are lower now than they have been, and certainly financial institutions like mainstream banks that are able to access their capital at a lower rate than what a CDFI can access are definitely seeing lower rates. And that's why you're seeing so many people who are homeowners refinance their homes because rates are lower.
Yes, indeed. And do you expect that rate to actually stay the same into 2021?
We'll see. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I don't think they're going to go up anytime soon, but I'm certainly no economist, so I just stay tuned and listen to what the Fed says, but I don't think it'll go up anytime soon.
And I know when I emailed you for Quintin's Close-Ups months ago, and I realized that one of my last interviews with you was in March prior to COVID, But you talked to me
Right.
earlier about obviously the affordable housing, and you wanted to talk about it in this particular interview. And I went down to your blog on your website, and you talk about affordable housing as an organization. You said this: housing should not be a privilege. Uh, let me go in depth. Actually, it says this: the United Nations define the right to adequate housing as quote the right to live somewhere in security, peace, and dignity, which is not a privilege for households that fall under the persistent poverty line. And let me ask you this: what households in Charleston fall under the persistent poverty line right now?
So what we know based on the research is that the Low Country faces a significant affordable housing challenge. So let's get back to the issue of the affordable housing referendum that's on the ballot in Charleston County, which was kind of the initial premise of your question. So
Right.
what we know is that about a third of the families in Charleston County are housing cost burdened, meaning that more than 30% of their household income goes towards their housing costs. And so what happens when you have that kind of sort of dynamic with income and housing costs is that families have to choose between paying for necessities. So, do you pay for housing or do you pay for groceries, or, maybe one month you might have to skip on your medicine? How do you pay for transportation? And so what is on the ballot in November in Charleston County are two questions around an affordable housing fund. And so question number one actually authorizes Charleston County Council to levy a 2 mil tax increase in Charleston County to fund the local housing trust fund, which would finance obviously affordable housing initiatives. And so just for reference, a 2 mil tax increase would be $8 per $100,000 on a primary residence, and then $12 per $100,000 for businesses and second homeowners. So it's a relatively small tax increase that could have a really huge impact. So that's question one. Question one, if you vote yes on question one, you're saying, yes, I'm in favor of a 2 mil tax increase to fund or to support affordable housing initiatives. Question two would allow the county to issue a $130 million general obligation bond that would pay for, basically, it would be payable from the tax increase. So it basically, what it would do is kind of front load. Instead of pay as you go every year with tax revenue that comes in, the bond allows it to be funded all at once. And we're hoping for a yes vote on that question as well, because it would allow more housing to be produced faster. Because you would have more money available to support and finance affordable housing than you would if you had, kind of this pay as you go every year, several $1 million coming in. You would get all the money up front, so you could do more, kind of scale it up quicker. So that's what'll be on the ballot for voters in Charleston County in November. And so we're hoping for a yes vote on both of those questions. There's a really great coalition in place that is working to advocate for the Low Country Housing Fund. Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce is a convening partner, along with South Carolina Community Loan Fund, of course, the Trident Association of Realtors, Cajun, the Charleston Area Justice Ministry, LAMC is on there, the Low Country Alliance for Model Communities, and then Metanoia. So it's a really great group of convening partners that represents both nonprofit, faith-based, and for-profit interests throughout Charleston County.
And let me articulate a little bit better too, because I know that you just mentioned that if this is basically passed, houses will come more faster for low-income housing. When do you expect for that to happen?
Well, so some of it depends on if, on how this thing gets structured. So if it passes, if voters vote yes, the county will run an RFP process. So they will actually be looking for a third-party administrator of the fund. And so, that process will have to happen first. And then, depending on which entity is selected to run and administer the fund, that has to be decided first before money can start getting out on the streets. But we'll be a third party. That group will be responsible for having to issue, obviously, a report to council every year about how the funds are being used. The RFP process will be structured and transparent. And so it's very important, obviously, anytime tax dollars are in play, that we have, good accountability and transparency in the process.
Now, that third party, which one is ideal right now?
It just depends on what the RFP process looks like. Certainly you would want an entity that has experience financing affordable housing. You would want an entity that knows and is familiar with development and the affordable housing development process. And then, one certainly that has administered this type of funding before. Obviously, like I said, you're working with taxpayer dollars. It's a very big responsibility. And so someone who can really get this money out efficiently, that can make sure it gets leveraged, and to make sure that we're really getting the most that we can out of every dollar to support and create affordable housing in Charleston County.
And how is affordable housing leveraged these days?
So typically there's much more than one funding source in affordable housing deals. So you may have for larger sort of multifamily developments, developers will oftentimes access the low-income housing tax credit from South Carolina State Housing Authority. It's obviously a federal tax credit, so it's an IRS program, but it's administered through the State Housing Authority. So typically you may have some tax credit equity in a project, along with more traditional debt from a financial institution. You might have debt from a CDFI, like South Carolina Community Loan Fund. You may have some grant funding from a city or municipality. And so we call it the lasagna financing, because it's just layer upon layer upon layer. Actually, one of the big wins that we had recently at the state level in the legislature was there is now a state low-income housing tax credit, which mirrors the federal credit. So that allows for additional equity to be put in projects. It's a great financing tool, sort of another tool in the toolbox to help create additional affordable housing in South Carolina. It's a really big win and a wonderful thing to have that. So the idea being with the leverage piece that, one source comes in and then you just you can leverage, you can build upon that one source. You can attract additional capital into the deal, into affordable housing deals that way. And then, sometimes for smaller deals, there might be, grant funding and then maybe only one source of debt. So kind of just depends on the size and the scale of the projects.
Now, from this, let's assume that the affordable housing referendum is passed, and some people may like that and some people may not. What equity would you look for in the project for that?
Well, it just depends on, so sometimes so for affordable housing, we have a 10% equity requirement. That's just our organization. Okay. So I can't speak for what any county requirement would be. But we, for affordable housing, have a 10% equity requirement in those deals, 10 to 20% in those deals, just to, depending on the sort of size and scope of each individual deal. So we have underwriting standards around that ourselves.
And I know, as I go back to the blog, you said this quote: low-income households are more likely than other renters to sacrifice other necessities, as you mentioned earlier, to pay rent, such as healthy food and health care. They often experience unstable housing situations like evictions. This reality does not allow for them to experience security, peace, or dignity. What other realities are there with low-income households?
Well, I think just kind of the stress, I think of, which gets back to what that blog posting was making the point about, if you're constantly worried about where you're going to live or how you're going to meet your rent the next month, it becomes very difficult to worry, to also focus on, how am I going to help my child with their homework? You might be working more than one job. It's hard to focus on certainly any kind of mental health well-being, sort of in terms of you may not have enough leisure time or time to relax and rest, to really recharge, to be able to kind of deal with that stress on sort of a physical level. But just the day-to-day demands, it is expensive to pay for transportation, for healthcare, for costs associated with schooling and school supplies. Due to COVID, a lot of people's work situation is very tenuous. So the availability of safe, stable, affordable housing is absolutely crucial right now. We've been in a very interesting point in human history where home has become the place where we live, work, worship, play, learn. Everything is happening from home right now. For those of us who are fortunate enough to have a job that allows us to work from home. So what we have to remember is some people still have transportation costs. They're still having to go to work, be on the front lines. And so truly, there has never kind of been a better time to make the case for the importance of affordable housing. It's a safety issue. It's a health issue. It's an economic issue. And frankly, it's just, it's exactly what we said on our blog posting. It shouldn't be a privilege to have a place to live.
And the blog goes on to say this quote, affordable housing contributes to the basic human need for shelter while also supporting the well-being of vulnerable families and seniors. What else does affordable housing contribute to?
I think just an overall societal well-being. When people, and all people, have a place to live, it begins to sort of level out the opportunity for access to economic security. It's been shown that schools with mixed income students can help all students achieve better outcomes. That is possible with diverse housing price points. I think there's an argument to be made from the workforce point of view. It's hard to hire and maintain a workforce when people are having to drive long distances to work due to the fact that they can't afford a place to live. More affordable housing and creates jobs. You've got to have a construction force to build those jobs. And then, with people sort of moving around within a community, that helps support local businesses. It's just there are so many cases to be made for availability of affordable housing, on an education front, a health front, an economic front. It's difficult for me to articulate all of the benefits of that. It's just so, kind of, even if you think back, if you want to get a little more theoretical about it and think back to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like the most basic set of needs are like food, shelter, safety. And the fact that we still in this region and in this day and age have people who literally can't afford a place to live and may be working more than one job is just not acceptable.
And I think I heard you right, but I think you said diverse housing price points. What exactly are those?
So you want to have it's important to have a mixture of housing options in a community. You want, and I always think about it in terms of some people are going to need to rent. Like, most people don't become an adult and go off and buy their first home. Like, you've got to have people need to have a place to sort of start off either earlier in their career or after they've left home. You need to afford to kind of be able to afford to have that first place. Not everyone can just go straight to home ownership. So rental is really important. And then you sort of see the next phase as not everyone wants a single family house with a big yard and a white picket fence. So there needs to be high density sort of townhome kind of developments where people, or condos even, where it's smaller spaces that are more densely developed. People may want to be within walking distance to, amenities that are close to them. And then some people do want a large home with lots of space. And so there's a lot of sort of diversity of housing options in there. And I think to really ensure sort of a vibrant, diverse community that welcomes, that truly is welcoming of all of the people that it takes to make a community work, you need a place for those folks to live. And it isn't one size fits all. So no one person in a community is the same. No one family is the same. And you have to think of housing the same way. There's got to be a diversity of options there.
Now, where exactly is availability for high density here in Charleston?
Well, that's when you get into zoning and planning issues. And so, density, it does tend to be controversial for a lot of folks. But I think, density where it makes sense, where there can be a large number of units that is close to good pedestrian access and businesses can be a really great way to increase the availability of affordable housing, bring some costs down, and then have people be positioned where maybe they don't need to hop in a car, and they can walk to a grocery store. They can get on their bikes and ride places safely. So, I think density where it makes sense is important. Affordable housing, the issue of affordable housing definitely is not only solved by capital. There has to be planning and land use policies in place that support affordable housing, including, opportunities for higher density, parking requirement waivers and that sort of thing. So there are some things that that can be done and that are being done to increase the availability of affordable housing from kind of that planning and land use side.
Let me stay on that because obviously you talk about the land use policies. Which one would your organization adopt or even endorse?
Well, we really don't. We're not land use and planning experts at the Loan Fund. What we would be more in favor of is any any sort of incentive that that increases the availability of affordable housing. So we certainly would just encourage any kind of incentive that can be done in terms of zoning that increases the amount of affordable housing that can be created in a municipality or in a city based on that particular city's need.
And the blog went on to say this, quote, affordable housing increases the amount of money families put towards household needs. It contributes to educational outcomes by creating stable living environments and improving the mental and physical health of residents by improving quality of life. What is the typical amount of money for families in Charleston right now?
So the median income is put out, that is a number that is determined by HUD, and that would vary by location. So Charleston is in an MSA, which means that like Charleston and North Charleston are kind of grouped together for median incomes. But the point on that blog is exactly right in terms of educational outcomes. So thinking about that, if you're a child and you're in school and you are being moved from school to school, maybe every year or sometimes multiple times per year, there's just no good opportunity for you to sort of settle in and learn because you're constantly in flux. And so I think, when we think about education in the Tri-County and workforce development, affordable housing certainly plays a role in that. And so, thinking about sort of how can we keep families more stably housed and what is that availability of affordable housing for families. And we know right now it's just so limited because frankly, the cost of land and the cost of construction is so high. And so right now, the median family income in Charleston is right around just a little bit less than $55,000 for that would be for a household of one. Right. And so, consider $55,000 and then sort of what you can afford, either mortgage or rent. It's hard. There's a great study that the National Low Income Housing Coalition puts out called Out of Reach 2020. And that study it actually takes, it takes the median income and sort of the average housing costs in each state, and it even breaks it down by each county and each MSA. And you can really look and see what those housing versus wage costs are for your area. So I'll pull up Charleston's right now while we're kind of chatting, just to give you a good idea of what the data is saying right now from Charleston. And I apologize, I don't have that readily available. Okay, so right now in Charleston, to afford the housing wage in Charleston, so sort of what you would need to afford a 2-bedroom apartment is $22 an hour. That's about $5 an hour higher than what the housing wage is for the state. And so, definitely seeing, and that shouldn't be surprising because we know that housing costs are higher here in Charleston. The annual income needed to afford a 2-bedroom apartment is right around $47,000. So if you remember what that wage was that we just said, I mean, that's cutting it pretty close, and that's a 2-bedroom. So if you've got, a family, you're going to need, likely more than 2 bedrooms. And so it gets, it's close. We have wages here that aren't necessarily, they don't keep pace with the housing costs in this region.
I know this might be a difficult question, Anna, but what will the median income be after this affordable housing initiative might pass, or what might not?
I don't know that the affordable housing initiative would have any bearing on the median income, because the median income is just kind of the average of it's the median of what people make. And so housing costs don't bear into that. That's just based on people's incomes. You might see some changes in the median income in the aftermath of COVID, but I have no idea what that's going to look like.
And you talked earlier about workforce development. Are there any programs out there right now for residents?
Yes, the workforce development programs, absolutely. So, the chamber has a good program where they're going into school and really working with schools around kind of what they see the needs of Charleston's workforce to be kind of anticipating future needs of that. And there's a number of, skills development programs and training programs through Trident Tech and a number of other organizations as well.
And when you talk about affordable housing and the median income, where is it for minorities?
Well, there's a well-documented wage gap between Black workers and white workers, and so we know it's been proven that many times Black workers earn less than white earners. So you just, I think, can expect that there'll be some further disparities there based on sort of earnings alone, and then any other sort of housing discrimination that may be experienced as folks either look for rentals or try to get mortgages. Definitely well-documented challenges for African Americans and other people of color.
Now, those disparities, which ones do you see creeping up right now amidst COVID?
Well, I think COVID has done a good job of really exposing disparities that have been there the whole time. I just think, when the world sort of had time to pause and we watched who was most impacted by losing their job first, or whose housing situation was the most tenuous, these were things that we have kind of, that we've sort of known and have seen, and COVID just sort of blew the cover off of all of that. These aren't really, COVID isn't exposing new challenges, it's exacerbating existing challenges.
And you talked earlier in that blog post that says this quote, affordable housing increases the amount of money families put towards housing needs. It contributes to educational outcomes by creating stable living environments. and improving the mental and physical health of residents by improving quality of life. Let me drill on that. Quality of life. What exactly is that right now?
Well, I think it's however an individual defines it. But you want to, quality of life to me may be different than quality of life is to you, because there are different things that enhance our quality of life. But I think generally it is, do I have do my children have a safe place to be outside and play? Do I have access to essential services? Am I safe in my home? Do I have a quality educational opportunity? Do I have access to business and job opportunities? So I think quality of life is sort of a very expansive term that can mean different things to different people, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think it's about, do you have access to the things that you need, not just to survive, but to thrive.
Now, obviously, as Executive Director for the South Carolina Community Loan Fund, how do you define and look at quality of life?
Well, as the Executive Director of the South Carolina Community Loan Fund, I look at it in terms of, access to affordable housing, a community having access to essential facilities, so childcare opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities, job opportunities, economic opportunities, and then, access to healthy food, of course, is important, and just really access to capital that communities need to support the assets, community-based assets that they need to have a healthy, wealthy community.
Anna Lewin, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Up.
Thank you, Quintin. Take care. Good to be back.
Thank you so much.